Good evening, and welcome to the latest edition of Shooting Straight with me, Voice of the Forge. I haven't been around for a few weeks, and that's mainly because I've been keeping myself to myself with other projects and trying just basically to get on through life. But today, I am going to go on a rant, basically over content ratings. There has been a few news articles in the media recently about large-breasted heroines and how they damage children's development, and then they are basically screenshotting games like Dead or Alive 3, which is an 18-rated game. Or at least the mature 17 plus, whatever the top rating is that isn't adult only in whatever country. And this got me to thinking about other things to do with games where you can physically tell when someone isn't the age they're supposed to be when they're playing a game. And with the Dead or Alive Extreme 3 type games, they're not even really being honest in some of the games they're actually calling out. Using assets from other Japanese games, for instance, is something that is quite problematic all by itself. But with the release of Morrowind, I've noticed a spike online of people playing games who are under the age of 18. And this has become so commonplace that they're streaming on YouTube. Now, if someone was 15, 16, I wouldn't have an issue, but when they barely look 10, then there has to be a line drawn in the sand where we turn around and say, where, as a community, do we, as gamers, police our own and say, this game isn't for you, it was never intended for you, and as a result, we can't look at computer gaming moms or dads and say, well, we've decided it's fine if it's if it's an online game. It's a game that is rated to be an 18 plus game because of the amount of violence in it and the fact that it is played online. People are always going on about the dangers of the interwebs and won't somebody think of the children. And I've always been one that turns around and says, no, at the end of the day, it is up to people to do pretty much what they want to do. I'm fairly libertarian when it comes to people doing what they want to do. But when this crosses over into the public forum, into a game such as Grand Theft Auto 5, which is, again, the Grand Theft Auto series has always been one for the brickbats. Won't somebody think of the children? People doing naughty things. When we are talking about a game service which is online, which has to have a certain amount of restrictions, I then look at the YouTube's content guidelines itself and the terms and conditions, where it actually says if you are not of an age to form a legally binding contract that you can't use their services as a creator. And it kind of seems to rankle with me that so much is ignored when it comes to certain aspects of protection, in air quotes, when it comes to children and things like this, whereby a blind eye seems to be turned. If I was a retailer and I'm selling you the game, I can be fined up the wazoo by people like the European Standards Agency that monitors the ESRB system, and similar. Certain games in Germany are censored because of bloody content. Because won't somebody think of the children? Grown adults can't play what they want to be able to play in the ways they want to be able to play it because of this insidious disregard for law. And this is something which is quite close to my heart, because I suffer with anxiety when I leave my abode. I suffer with an aversion to wanting to be out where there is people, because I spent time working in law enforcement, and I've seen the seedy underside, the seedy underbelly that bubbles away beneath the veneer of respectability that we seem to have in the Western civilized world. I've seen how quickly people can turn from being nice as pie to nasty bastards in an instant, and there is no such thing as low risk. Everything is either unknown or high, and if it's unknown, then you've got to treat it as higher than high, because you never know when it's going to become a problem. So when people do certain things which are not law-abiding, like jumping red lights or behaving in a certain way which is counter to the public peace, I tend to get a little bit more agitated and worked up than I already do, which sends my stress levels through the roof, and they're already much higher than a normal person's to begin with because of the anxiety, and I tend to suffer all kinds of issues. So I tend not to want to go out at all, because I don't want to have to deal with society, because it is such a stress. And then we look at laws, and there have been issues with things in the media in the past week and a bit where atrocities have been committed. I don't dwell on those because they could happen at any time to anyone. That isn't why I'm afraid to go out. I'm afraid of the normal person who can turn at an instant. And it could be one person on their own, it could be 3 people with their friends, they could be in their 50s and 60s, they could be 12. You never know anymore, because the rule of law has broken down at its most basic and fundamental level. And what do I mean by this? Well, it's quite simple. What I mean by this is the fact that low-level crimes are no longer upheld, except for talking on your mobile phone, which again is still seen as being socially acceptable. We haven't seen the sea change about talking on mobile phones whilst in a moving vehicle as the driver, as we have with things like drink driving. The social opprobrium doesn't exist, and it seems to be that we are drifting ever and ever closer to a police force which doesn't respond to emergencies unless they are of a specific type. Gone are the days where you could phone the police station to report your burglary and have a police officer around that night. Gone are the days where you could report an assault and police would be there in a timely fashion. You're now having to wait for maybe 2 or 3 days until there is space on the police calendar to be able to fit you into their busy schedule somewhere. Because of cuts? Yeah, cuts. Because of policing priorities, and as we are exceedingly seeing, online is being increasingly policed for hate speech. Well, this is an interesting juxtaposition, because if you are using a service like YouTube and you are not of an age to actually be using the service, and you espouse naively views that your parents may hold, or views that are entrenched in an undercurrent in your school, and I am talking primarily about those who may not necessarily be at primary school anymore, but in sort of like the year 7, year 8 category, who may not necessarily have much in the way of worldly wisdom, and yet bandy words around because they think they are funny, or because they think it's what adults do, because they may not have very good role models. Where do the police stand on this? They are so hands-off in every other area when it comes to children. that when children themselves are putting themselves into a position on Twitter, on Facebook, and on YouTube, where does the hammer fall? Where does this line of policing actually extend? Because if I, as an adult, can't say certain things, and I can be held legally responsible because of my age, then at what point does the platform become legally responsible if they have people who are not of legal age, who have actually breached the very fundamental terms and conditions required to be using the service? And yes, I am looking at you as well, Facebook, with your alleged aged 13 for a profile, wink wink. Where do we go? At what point do we actually start policing these things in a serious and coherent manner? One of the things that I've often thought unfit for purpose are some of our child exploitation laws. When you actually criminalise the very people that you are trying to protect, there is something fundamentally wrong with the law itself. And this brings us to sexting. Because child pornography does exactly that. Because if you are under 18, you are a child. And yet, in the UK, the legal age of consent is 16. So, you can fuck each other, you just can't film yourself doing it. Kudos. We now have a grey area where if you're in a position of responsibility, that age of consent is now 18, to try and reflect the fact that there is a power imbalance in the relationship between a student and a teacher. So that then means that we have a two-tier law system, one for people in positions of authority, and then everybody else. But when you criminalise a 16-year-old for sending parts of their body to another 16-year-old, then there are problems with the law when that recognises you as a child, and yet legally you are allowed to actually do what those pictures represent. And then we have issues with voting age, as we have seen with the recent election. There are certain parts of the UK, certain political parties that want to lower the voting age to 16. Well, we've just got it so that we're sending people all the way through to nearly 21 without leaving the educational establishment. And yet we want to give them the vote at 16, when they can't drink, when they can't smoke, but they can have sex, they just can't take pictures of it. When they can't play certain games with violent or sexual content because of mature themes like alcohol or drugs or tobacco or anything like these. Where does the rule of law actually start and stop for the responsibility for people to actually do things and be held responsible in their lives, and yet have a say in which the country actually moves forward? Because we have people who are in their 40s and 50s who can't abide by the rule of law, and if they break the law badly enough, they have the vote taken away from them, which, as part of the anti-Brexit thing and everything else, people forget that the EU want to impose on the UK, and yes, I am being UK-centric, they want to impose the franchise on prisoners who have had that taken away as part of their removal from a civil society. They have been disenfranchised for the length of their prison service, their prison time. Because they have to service the punishment for the crimes they have committed. They have committed a civil injury, and as a part of their punishment, they have to be disenfranchised because it is part and parcel of the contract with society that they have broken. So, when we have other people doing other things that break the societal contract, what do we do with them? How do we police this? When do people take responsibility? Just food for thought. Because at what point does personal responsibility end, corporate responsibility begin, and the responsibility of the state end? And at the moment we seem to be encroaching in all kinds of different ways on personal liberties, but at no point are we actually looking at the rights of the individual and what they can expect in return for having such freedoms curtailed. Because it seems to me the way we're going is that we're talking tough on doing all these things when it comes to freedom of speech and everything else, and yet we can't get our own house in order when it comes to the sale or the playing of a pastime. Something which should be so fucking easy to actually do something about. We can't. And if we cannot police something as simple and as innocent as child's play, then what right do we have as a society to say that our policing system is fit for purpose? I leave it there, because at the very fundamental issue it all boils down to liberty, equality under the law. If someone breaks the law, they should be punished for it. If someone is not responsible for their actions because they are under the age of majority, at which point I will hasten to add the age of criminal responsibility in the UK is 10. It is a rebuttable defence to say that you do not know what you are doing is wrong. It is more, you have to prove that it is more than playful naughtiness and you understand there are serious repercussions for your actions, but you can be held criminally liable at 10 if you know that you have done something which is more than merely naughty. So we have all these things thrown into the arena, and I think it is time that we as a society actually take stock and look at where we are heading. Because it seems to me that we are heading into the arena where we are criminalising more and more behaviours, and yet we hold people less and less criminally responsible until such time as something major happens. And then it's kind of like, oh, when somebody think of the children. And yet we haven't been thinking of the children for any of this last bit at all. And yet we've criminalised them because we've never told them no. We've never said that there are boundaries in place, and these kids that do these kind of things go on to become adults that have never been told no. And we wonder where identity politics comes from, and the my feels are more than your rights. Where do we end? I leave it there for your thought and your perusal. I am, as always, Voice of the Forge. You can reach me on Twitter, on Twitch, on various channels. You can look at the web shop that we have, mythandmachine.co.uk, and feel free to comment on the YouTube video wherever I host it, whether it's YouTube, on Minds, on Vimeo, on VidMe, wherever I decide to put it. I own the copyright, I'll do what the fuck I like with it. Answers on a postcard, please. I'd like to see where we stand as a group of people. Thank you for listening.